What happens when a promising medical student walks into court with a lie so obvious that it threatens to destroy everything he's worked for, only for a legendary judge to see something everyone else missed? This is the story of Marcus Chen, a 24-year-old third-year medical student whose entire future hung by a thread in a Providence courtroom, and the moment of truth that would change not just his life, but everyone watching. If you've ever made a mistake that felt like it could end everything, drop a comment below. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances. Marcus walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom on a cold February morning in 2023, wearing a navy suit that still had the department store creases visible. His hands trembled as he clutched a worn leather folder containing documents he hoped would save him. What he didn't know was that those same documents would nearly destroy him instead. The charge seemed simple enough: parking in a handicapped spot outside Providence General Hospital without a permit, a $100 fine. For most people, it would be an annoyance. For Marcus, it represented something far more catastrophic, because this wasn't his first offense. It was his third violation in 6 months, and the Rhode Island Medical Board had made it crystal clear: any further infractions, any hint of dishonesty or disregard for rules, and his medical school enrollment would be terminated immediately. Like this video if you believe one mistake shouldn't define someone's entire future. Marcus Chen, the bailiff called out, his voice echoing through the packed courtroom. Gallery seats filled with people fighting traffic tickets and permit violations watched as Marcus stood, his legs feeling like they might give out beneath him. He'd been up all night, rehearsing what he would say, practicing the explanation that he prayed would convince Judge Caprio to show mercy. Judge Frank Caprio looked up from the case file, his reading glasses perched on his nose, that familiar grandfatherly expression settling on his face. For decades, he'd been known as the most compassionate judge in America, a man who looked beyond the violation to see the human being standing before him. But he was also known for something else: an almost supernatural ability to detect when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. "Good morning, Mr. Chen," Judge Caprio said warmly. "I see here you're a medical student at Brown University. That's quite an accomplishment." "Yes, Your Honor." "Third year." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "And you're here today because on January 15th of this year, you parked in a designated handicapped parking space at Providence General Hospital without displaying the proper permit. Is that correct?" Quote. Marcus nodded, then remembered to speak aloud. "Yes, Your Honor, but I can explain." "I'm sure you can," Judge Caprio interrupted gently. "But before you do, I want you to understand something. This courtroom has seen thousands of parking violations. I've heard every excuse, every explanation, every justification. What I care about isn't the story you've prepared. What I care about is the truth. Do you understand the difference?" Quote, "Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message." The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the courtroom's cool temperature. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." "Good. Then please, tell me what happened that day." This was it, the moment Marcus had rehearsed. He opened his leather folder and pulled out a hospital work schedule printed on official Providence General letterhead. His hands shook slightly as he held it up. "Your Honor, on January 15th, I was called in for an emergency situation in the intensive care unit. I'm doing my clinical rotation in critical care, and there was a patient coding. That means their heart had stopped. Every second mattered. I didn't have time to find regular parking. I didn't have time to circle the lot looking for a space. A woman was dying, and I made the decision that saving her life was more important than parking regulations." Quote. The gallery murmured. It sounded noble, heroic even. Marcus watched Judge Caprio's face for any sign of approval, any indication that his explanation was landing. Judge Caprio studied the document Marcus had submitted. "This schedule shows you were on duty that day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. What time did you park in the handicapped spot?" Quote, "Around 2:30 p.m., Your Honor. That's when I got the emergency call." Quote. The judge's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You got called in, but you were already on duty according to this schedule." Marcus's mouth went dry. Yes, I was on duty, but I'd stepped out briefly. For lunch. When I came back, that's when the emergency happened, and I had to park quickly. Drop a comment if you can sense when someone's story doesn't add up. I see. Judge Caprio set down the schedule and picked up another document from his file. Mr. Chen, I have here the parking enforcement officer's report. Officer Rodriguez, are you present? Quote, a uniformed woman in her mid-40s stood from the back of the courtroom. Yes, Your Honor. Officer Rodriguez, can you tell me what you observed on January 15th at approximately 2:30 p.m.? Quote, Officer Maria Rodriguez walked to the front of the courtroom, her stride confident and professional. She'd been writing parking tickets for 12 years and had testified in Judge Caprio's courtroom dozens of times. Yes, Your Honor. I was conducting routine enforcement in the Providence General Hospital parking lot when I observed a silver Honda Civic, license plate Rhode Island 847JKL, parked in a designated handicap space without the required permit or placard displayed. And what did you observe about the vehicle and its surroundings? Quote, the vehicle was parked neatly within the space lines. The engine was cold when I touched the hood, meaning it had been there for some time, not just pulled in hastily. I noted this in my report because I specifically look for this when people claim emergency situations. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The rehearsed explanation was crumbling. Officer Rodriguez continued. I also observed, through the vehicle's window, a CVS pharmacy bag on the passenger seat containing what appeared to be personal care items, and a Starbucks cup in the center console that was still partially full. The cup had writing on it with what looked like a name and a mobile order timestamp. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Did you photograph these items, Officer Rodriguez? Quote, yes, Your Honor. It's standard procedure for me when details might be relevant. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. Hit subscribe if you appreciate officers who pay attention to details. Judge Caprio studied the photographs in silence. The courtroom was so quiet that people could hear the ceiling fan rotating slowly overhead. Marcus wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, to be anywhere but standing before this man who was now looking at him with an expression that had shifted from warmth to something more analytical. Mr. Chen, this photograph shows a Starbucks mobile order receipt on the cup. The timestamp says 2:17 p.m. The name on the cup is Marcus. The order location is listed as the Starbucks on Wickenden Street, approximately 8 blocks from the hospital. Judge Caprio looked up. If you were responding to an emergency code at 2:30 p.m., why were you picking up a coffee order 13 minutes earlier several blocks away? Quote, the gallery's murmur grew louder. Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard, he's lying. Marcus's face flushed deep red. Your Honor, that must have been from earlier in the day. I reuse cups for water. The receipt is clearly visible in the photograph, Mr. Chen. It shows January 15th, 2:17 p.m. There's condensation still visible on the outside of the cup, indicating a cold drink recently purchased. Judge Caprio's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. I'm going to ask you again, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer, what really happened that day? Quote, this is the moment where everything could have ended. Marcus's medical career, his dreams of becoming a physician, his parents, sacrifices to put him through school, all of it balanced on the edge of a knife. And Marcus, terrified and cornered, made the worst possible decision. He doubled down. Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm telling you the truth. Maybe I'm confused about the timeline, but I was responding to an emergency. I have colleagues who can verify. Stop. Judge Caprio's single word cut through Marcus's desperate explanation like a scalpel. Mr. Chen, I'm going to tell you something that I learned in 40 years on this bench. When people tell the truth, even when the truth makes them look bad, there's a consistency to it, a simplicity. But when people lie, they add details, they over-explain. They provide documentation that seems official but crumbles under scrutiny. The judge held up the hospital schedule Marcus had submitted. This schedule is real. You were on duty that day. But you weren't called in for an emergency, you were already there. So why did you park in a handicapped spot in the middle of your shift? Quote, Like this video if you've ever watched someone dig themselves into a deeper hole. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing through options that were vanishing like smoke. He could maintain the lie, but Judge Caprio clearly didn't believe him. He could admit to a partial truth, but what version? The silence stretched on, becoming unbearable. Finally, Judge Caprio spoke again, but his tone had changed. The steel was still there, but something else had entered his voice. Not quite compassion, not yet, but curiosity. Mr. Chen, I'm looking at your record here. 3 parking violations in 6 months. The first was in September outside a pharmacy. The second was in November outside a medical supply store. Both times, you parked in handicapped spaces without a permit. Both times, you paid the fine without contest. He paused. But this time you came to court to fight it. You prepared a document. You created an explanation. Why? What's different about this third violation? Quote. And there it was, the question that cut through all of Marcus's defenses and reached the truth he'd been desperately trying to hide. His eyes filled with tears that he tried to blink back. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. Because I can't afford another one, Your Honor. The medical board, they'll expel me. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. That's the first completely true thing you've said since walking into this courtroom. Now, let's try again. What really happened on January 15th? Quote. Marcus closed his eyes. In that moment, he saw his entire future branching into 2 paths. One where he continued lying and almost certainly lost everything. Another where he told the truth and, what? Still lost everything, but at least with his integrity intact? Share this with someone who's had to make an impossible choice. I was tired, Your Honor. The words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. I'd been on shift since 6 a.m. I had a 15-minute break at 2 p.m. I drove to get coffee because the hospital coffee tastes like dirt and I needed something, anything, to keep me going. I have 4 more hours of rounds. When I got back to the hospital, the main lot was full. The secondary lot was full. There's a third lot 5 blocks away, but that would mean 15 minutes of walking, and I only had a few minutes left on my break. He was crying now, tears running down his face, but he kept talking. I saw the handicapped spot right by the entrance. And I thought just this once. Just for a few hours while I finish my shift. Nobody's using it. It's just sitting empty. And I'm so tired, Your Honor. I'm so tired all the time. Medical school it's brutal. I study until 2 a.m. and wake up at 5. I haven't had a full night's sleep in 3 years. And I made a selfish, terrible decision because I was tired and I didn't want to walk. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the people who'd been whispering had stopped. Marcus continued, his voice breaking. The other 2 times were the same. Not emergencies. Just convenience. Just me being selfish and thinking the rules didn't apply to me because I was busy, because I was important, because I was going to be a doctor and saving lives meant I could take shortcuts. He looked directly at Judge Caprio, no longer trying to hide his tears. You asked me about truth, Your Honor. The truth is I'm not the person I thought I was. The truth is I've been cutting corners and justifying it, because I'm stressed and overwhelmed. The truth is I don't deserve mercy. I deserve whatever consequences come from this. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, studying the young man before him. The judge's expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those eyes that had seen thousands of defendants, had witnessed every human emotion and motivation, held something complex. Not quite approval, but perhaps understanding? Drop a comment below about a time you had to admit you were wrong. Mr. Chen, do you know why I started asking you detailed questions about that day? The judge's voice was softer now. It wasn't because I enjoy catching people in lies. It was because your story didn't make sense, but more importantly because I saw something in your file that concerned me. He picked up another document. I have here a letter from Dr. Patricia Huang, the director of your medical school program. It was submitted to this court 3 days ago, which means you didn't know about it when you prepared your defense. Marcus's eyes widened. Dr. Huang had written to the court? The stern, uncompromising program director who'd warned him that one more mistake would end his career? Judge Caprio began to read. Judge Caprio, I am writing regarding Marcus Chen, one of our third-year medical students who is scheduled to appear before you concerning a parking violation. I want you to know that Marcus is facing expulsion from our program. However, I also want you to know some things about Marcus that he would never tell you himself. The judge looked up briefly at Marcus, then continued reading. Marcus comes from a family of extremely limited means. His father works 3 jobs to help support him. His mother is disabled and requires daily care that Marcus provides in addition to his medical school obligations. Marcus has the highest academic scores in his class. He volunteers at a free clinic for uninsured patients every Saturday, despite his exhausting schedule. Last month, he donated blood to save a patient when we had a shortage of his rare blood type, even though he was recovering from the flu and the donation left him weakened for a week. Hit that subscribe button if you believe there's more to every story. Judge Caprio continued. Dr. Huang writes, I am not excusing Marcus's parking violations. Rules exist for important reasons, and he must face consequences. But I wanted you to know that the young man standing before you is not someone who believes rules don't apply to him because he's arrogant. He believes rules don't apply to him because he's drowning, and he's too proud to ask for help. Medical education breaks people, Your Honor. It breaks them down and rebuilds them into physicians. But sometimes we don't notice when someone is breaking in the wrong way, when the pressure is creating fractures rather than strength. Quote, the gallery was completely silent now, every person leaning forward to hear. Dr. Huang concludes, whatever your decision, I will support it. But I wanted you to have the complete picture of who Marcus Chen is, not just the tired, desperate young man who made 3 bad parking decisions, but the dedicated, compassionate person who has spent the last 3 years sacrificing everything to serve others. Quote, Judge Caprio set down the letter and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. When he looked at Marcus again, there were tears in the old judge's eyes, too. Mr. Chen, you stood before me today and lied. You prepared false documentation. You created an elaborate story designed to manipulate this court's sympathy. Those are serious actions that, in some cases, could result in criminal charges for court fraud. Do you understand that? Quote. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. But then something remarkable happened. You told the truth, not because I gave you an easy out, not because I showed you compassion first. You told the truth at the exact moment when lying might have still saved you, when admitting your deception guaranteed consequences. That tells me something important about your character. The judge leaned forward. It tells me that under pressure, when your back is against the wall, you still have the capacity to choose integrity over self-preservation. That's not a small thing, Mr. Chen. That's the foundation of what makes a good physician. Like this video if you believe people can choose better in their worst moments. But here's the problem we're facing. Judge Caprio continued. You didn't just make a mistake. You made the same mistake 3 times, which suggests a pattern. And then you lied about it, which suggests a deeper issue. If I simply dismiss this ticket, I'm telling you that a good sob story erases consequences. If I impose the full penalty, I'm potentially ending the career of someone who might save countless lives. So what do I do? Quote. He paused, letting the question hang in the air. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to pay the fine for all 3 parking violations, $300 total. That money goes to support accessibility services in our city, which seems appropriate. Second, you're going to complete 40 hours of community service, specifically helping disabled individuals with transportation challenges. You'll learn exactly why those parking spaces matter and who they're for. Third, you're going to write a formal apology to every disabled person who might have needed that space while you occupied it, and we'll publish it in the Providence Journal so others can learn from your mistake. Marcus was nodding, relief beginning to flood through him. But I'm not finished, Judge Caprio said, his voice sharpening. Fourth, you're going to meet with me once a month for the next 6 months. Not in this courtroom, but in my chambers. We're going to talk about medical ethics. about integrity, about the kind of physician you want to become. Because, Mr. Chen, if you're drowning, the solution isn't to cut corners, it's to learn to swim better, and I'm going to make sure you learn. The judge glanced at his notes. I'm also ordering something unusual. I'm going to require that you meet with a counselor who specializes in medical student burnout. Not as punishment, but as prevention. What you described, the exhaustion, the justification for rule breaking, the inability to ask for help, those are warning signs that Dr. Huang recognized, and I recognize. You can't serve patients if you're destroying yourself. Share this video with a medical student or anyone in a high-pressure career. Marcus's shoulders shook with sobs now, but they were different tears. Not fear and shame, but overwhelming relief and gratitude. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Quote, Don't thank me yet, Judge Caprio said, but there was warmth in his voice again. Because here's the final condition. If you miss a single community service hour, if you skip a single appointment with me, if you get any violation, parking or otherwise in the next 6 months, the deal is void. Full penalties apply, and I'll personally recommend to the medical board that they enforce whatever consequences they see fit. This is your second chance, Mr. Chen. You don't get a third. I understand, Your Honor. I won't let you down. You're not doing this for me, Judge Caprio corrected gently. You're doing it for yourself, for your future patients, for every person whose life might one day depend on your judgment and integrity. The question isn't whether you'll let me down, it's whether you'll let them down. The judge brought his gavel down, the sharp crack echoing through the courtroom. Case concluded. Next case. Marcus stood there for a moment, stunned, before the bailiff gently guided him away from the podium. As he walked back through the gallery toward the exit, something unexpected happened. People started clapping. It started with one person, then another, then the entire courtroom erupted in applause. An elderly woman with a walker touched Marcus's arm as he passed. Young man, you do right by that judge. He just saved your life. Marcus could only nod, tears still streaming down his face. But this isn't where the story ends. It's not even close. Drop a comment about what you think happens next. 3 days after his court appearance, Marcus sat in the office of Dr. Rachel Morrison, the counselor Judge Caprio had assigned. Her office was nothing like he'd expected, not cold and clinical, but warm, with plants on the windowsills and photographs of hiking trails on the walls. So, Dr. Morrison said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea, Judge Caprio sent me your case file. Want to tell me what's really going on? Quote, Marcus had planned to keep it together, to be professional and composed. But something about Dr. Morrison's directness, the lack of judgment in her voice, broke through his defenses. I'm failing, he said quietly, not academically, but as a person. I don't remember the last time I laughed. I don't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to, not because it was required or would look good on a residency application. I'm 24 years old, and I feel like I'm 50. When did you decide to become a doctor? Dr. Morrison asked. When I was 8, my little sister Maya had leukemia. I watched the doctor save her life, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, save people. And is that still why you want to be a doctor, or has it become about something else? Quote, the question stopped Marcus cold. He opened his mouth to give the automatic answer, the one he'd told countless interviewers and admissions committees. But sitting there in that warm office with this woman who seemed to see right through him, he couldn't make the words come out. I don't know anymore, he finally admitted. Somewhere between organic chemistry and clinical rotations, I stopped thinking about saving people and started thinking about surviving, just getting through the next exam. The next shift, the next day. Dr. Morrison nodded. Marcus, you know what the most common reason for medical errors is? It's not lack of knowledge. It's fatigue and burnout, the very things you're experiencing now. So here's what we're going to work on. Not just getting you through medical school, but making sure you're the kind of doctor who doesn't need to cut corners because you've learned to maintain yourself. Hit subscribe if you believe self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. Over the following weeks, Marcus's life began to change in ways he couldn't have predicted. The 40 hours of community service connected him with Transport Connect, a nonprofit that helped disabled individuals get to medical appointments. He met James, a 47-year-old man with muscular dystrophy who'd missed 3 critical specialist appointments because someone had parked in the only handicapped space near the building. "No hard feelings, kid," James had said when Marcus apologized. "But you gotta understand, for you, that spot is about convenience. For me, it's about whether I can participate in society or not." Quote, Marcus spent his service hours driving James and others to appointments, loading wheelchairs, learning adaptive equipment. He met Margaret, a 72-year-old woman with severe arthritis, who showed him photos of the daughter she hadn't been able to visit in a nursing home because the parking situation at the facility was impossible for her to navigate. He met Daniel, a 19-year-old veteran who'd lost both legs in Afghanistan and who told Marcus bluntly, "You know what's worse than losing my legs? People who see the wheelchair as invisible, like my needs don't matter because they can't see my disability from across a parking lot." Each story landed like a weight on Marcus's conscience, but not in a crushing way. In a way that built understanding, that constructed empathy brick by brick. The apology letter Judge Caprio had required him to write appeared in the Providence Journal 3 weeks after his court date. It was honest and raw, detailing his mistakes and the lessons he was learning. Marcus had expected ridicule or anger, but the response surprised him. His phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some were from other medical students sharing their own stories of burnout and bad decisions. Others were from disabled individuals thanking him for his honesty. One email came from a woman named Beth who wrote, "My son is also in medical school. He's struggling too, but won't admit it. Your letter gave me a way to start a conversation with him. Thank you for your courage. Like this video if you believe vulnerability is strength." The monthly meetings with Judge Caprio became something Marcus actually looked forward to. The first one had been terrifying, sitting across from the judge in his chambers, surrounded by law books and family photographs, uncertain what to expect. But Judge Caprio wasn't there to lecture him. Instead, he'd shared stories from his own life, times he'd made mistakes, times he'd been overwhelmed by responsibility. "When I was your age," the judge had said, "I thought being strong meant never showing weakness, never asking for help, powering through everything alone. You know what I learned? That's not strength, that's pride. And pride makes you brittle. Real strength is flexible. It bends. It admits when it needs support." By the 3rd month, those sessions had become conversations about medical ethics, about the complicated decisions physicians face, about how to maintain humanity in a system that often seems designed to strip it away. "Mr. Chen," Judge Caprio said during one April meeting, "I've been following your progress. Dr. Morrison tells me you're doing well in counseling. Transport Connect sent me a letter saying you've exceeded your required service hours and asked to continue volunteering. Your program director says your clinical performance has actually improved. So I want to ask you something. What changed?" Quote, Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I stopped running, Your Honor. I'd been running from my exhaustion, my fear, my limitations. Running so fast, I didn't have time to think about how miserable I was, or whether I was still doing this for the right reasons. But you forced me to stop, to look at what I'd done, to face the people I'd harmed. And when I stopped running," he paused, searching for the right words, "I realized I didn't need to run anymore." Judge Caprio smiled, a genuine expression of warmth and pride. "That's the difference between surviving and living, son. Survival is about running from threats. Living is about running toward purpose. You're learning to live again. Share this with someone who's been running too long." In May, something happened that brought Marcus's entire journey full circle. He was working a shift in the ICU when a critical patient arrived, a 53-year-old woman named Sandra Phillips who'd suffered a massive heart attack. The attending physician was barking orders, nurses were scrambling, monitors were screaming alarms. "Chen!" Dr. Rebecca Torres, the attending, shouted. "I need you on compressions, now!" Marcus jumped into position, beginning chest compressions while the team worked around him. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes of pushing down on Sandra's chest, counting compressions, watching the monitor for any sign of a rhythm. "We're losing her," someone said. "Keep going," Dr. Torres ordered. "Chen, don't stop," quote. Marcus's arms burned, sweat poured down his face. But he kept going, steady and strong, because a life depended on it. Because this was why he'd wanted to become a doctor in the first place, before the exhaustion and shortcuts had made him forget. 12 minutes in, the monitor beeped differently. Then again. A rhythm emerging from the flat line. "We've got sinus rhythm," the nurse announced. Sandra's heart was beating again. The room erupted in controlled chaos as the team stabilized her. But Marcus stepped back, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. He'd helped save her life. He'd been part of the team that pulled someone back from death. Later, after his shift ended, Marcus sat in his car in the hospital parking lot. Not in a handicapped space. He'd walked from the distant lot without complaint, had actually enjoyed the 10-minute walk as a way to decompress. He called his mother. "Mom? Yeah, I'm okay. I needed to tell you something. I saved someone today. Really saved them. And I remembered why I wanted to do this. All of it. The sleepless nights, the impossible exams, everything. It was worth it for that moment." His mother's voice came through the phone, warm and proud. "Marcus, your father and I always knew you'd find your way. We just had to trust that you'd learn what you needed to learn, when you needed to learn it." Quote, drop a comment about a moment that reminded you of your purpose. 2 weeks later, Marcus had his final scheduled meeting with Judge Caprio. 6 months had passed since that February morning when Marcus had walked into court with a lie that nearly destroyed him. Now he walked into the judge's chambers with something different, a clean record, completed community service, counseling sessions that had transformed his approach to medicine and life. "Mr. Chen," Judge Caprio greeted him warmly, "sit down. Let's talk about where you go from here. Your Honor, I wanted to thank you for seeing past my lies, for giving me a chance I didn't deserve, for caring enough to hold me accountable." The judge waved away the thanks. "Marcus, may I call you Marcus?" Quote, "Of course, Your Honor. Marcus, I didn't give you a chance you didn't deserve. I gave you a chance you earned by choosing truth over self-preservation at the moment it mattered most. Everything after that was you doing the work." He leaned back in his chair. "I've been a judge for 40 years. I've seen thousands of people stand where you stood, facing consequences for their actions. You know what most of them do? They blame circumstances, bad luck, other people. But you? You owned it, you faced it, you let it change you. That's rare. Dr. Morrison helped me understand that I wasn't just burning out, I was losing myself. Medical school was turning me into someone I didn't recognize, someone who could justify breaking rules, who could lie to avoid consequences. That's not the doctor I want to be. And what kind of doctor do you want to be?" Quote, Marcus had thought about this question a lot over the past months. "I want to be the kind of doctor who sees patients as people, not cases. Who remembers that a few extra minutes of compassion can matter as much as the right medication. Who asks for help when I need it instead of cutting corners because I'm too proud or too tired." He paused. "I want to be the kind of doctor who would make you proud, Your Honor. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of second chances." Judge Caprio's eyes glistened. "Marcus, I'm already proud of you. But more importantly, you should be proud of yourself. What you've done over these 6 months, the real work of changing your patterns, facing your mistakes, serving others, that's the hardest work there is. Saving a life in an emergency is dramatic and important, but this, building character, developing integrity, learning to be fully human even under pressure, that's the foundation everything else is built on." The judge pulled out a folder. "I've been keeping these to show you today." He spread out letters on his desk. "This one is from James at Transport Connect. He says you're the only volunteer who's never missed a scheduled drive, and you've started organizing a fundraiser to buy a new accessible van. This one is from Dr. Morrison. She says your progress in counseling has been exceptional, and you've agreed to be a peer mentor for other medical students struggling with burnout." He picked up another letter. "This one is from Dr. Huang at your medical school. She writes that your clinical evaluations have improved dramatically, but more than that, your interactions with patients have shown remarkable empathy and attention. And this one." He held up the final letter. "This one is from Sandra Phillips, the patient whose life you helped save in May. She wanted you to know that she's home with her family, recovering well, and she'll never forget the medical student who wouldn't give up on her. Marcus's vision blurred with tears as Judge Caprio continued. These letters aren't just testimonials to your service hours or your reformed behavior. They're evidence that you've become the person you were always meant to be. You just needed to stop running long enough to find that person. What happens now, Your Honor? Is this really over? Quote. Judge Caprio smiled. The legal case is over. Your obligation to this court is fulfilled. But I hope what we've built here isn't over. I hope you'll keep volunteering with Transport Connect. Keep meeting with Dr. Morrison. Keep being honest with yourself about your limitations and needs. And I hope, Marcus, that you'll stay in touch. Let me know when you graduate. When you become a resident. When you save your 100th life, your 1,000th. Because I'm invested in your story now, and I want to see how it unfolds. The judge stood and extended his hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the firmness of the grip, the warmth of genuine respect between them. Thank you, Your Honor, for everything. Just promise me one thing, Marcus. Promise me that when you're an attending physician someday, when you have medical students of your own who are exhausted and overwhelmed and making bad decisions, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that people are more than their worst choices, that accountability and compassion aren't opposites, they're partners, that second chances aren't about letting people off easy, but about believing they can do better. Like this video if you believe we're all more than our worst moments. I promise, Your Honor. I'll never forget. As Marcus left the courthouse that day, walking through the same doors he'd entered 6 months earlier, everything looked different. The afternoon sun felt warmer. The sounds of the city seemed more vibrant. He felt lighter, not because his burdens had been removed, but because he'd learned to carry them differently. His phone buzzed with a text from his study group. Marcus, we're meeting at the library tonight to prep for boards. You coming? Quote. Before, he would have said yes and pushed himself until midnight, too proud to admit he needed rest. Now he typed back, I'll be there, but I'm leaving by 9. Need to get sleep. Can we start an hour earlier instead? Quote. One of his classmates responded immediately. Smart. I should do that too. Let's all commit to leaving by 9. Small changes, sustainable choices. That's how transformation really worked. Not in dramatic courtroom moments, but in 1,000 daily decisions to prioritize integrity and self-care over convenience and pride. 3 months after his final meeting with Judge Caprio, Marcus was studying at his small apartment when he received an unexpected call. The number wasn't in his contacts. Hello? Quote. Marcus Chen, this is David Phillips. I'm Sandra's husband, the patient you helped save in May. Quote. Marcus sat up straight. Mr. Phillips, yes. How is Sandra doing? Quote. She's doing wonderfully, thanks to you and your team. But that's not why I'm calling. Sandra and I have been talking, and we want to do something. We want to establish a scholarship fund for medical students. Something to help students who are struggling financially, who might be tempted to cut corners because they're working 3 jobs while going to school. We'd like to call it the Marcus Chen Medical Student Wellness Scholarship. Marcus was speechless. Mr. Phillips, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but you don't need to name it after me. You're not just anything, Marcus. Sandra told me about the extra time you spent with her during her recovery, how you explained her medications in terms she could understand, how you listened when she was scared. That's not in the job description for a medical student. That's who you are. And we learned about your story, the parking violations, Judge Caprio, the work you've been doing. You turned a mistake into a mission. That's exactly the kind of doctor we want to support. Share this video to inspire someone who's struggling right now. The scholarship was established that fall. Marcus insisted on including a requirement that recipients also volunteer with disability services and complete counseling sessions about burnout prevention. By the end of the first year, it had supported 5 medical students. By the end of the second year, 15. Marcus graduated from medical school in May 2024, 15th in his class academically, but first in the category that mattered most to him, patient care evaluations. Judge Caprio attended the graduation ceremony, sitting in the audience wearing a suit and his signature warm smile. When Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the dean of the medical school paused before handing it to him. Marcus Chen has demonstrated not only medical excellence but extraordinary character growth during his time at Brown. He has shown us all that acknowledging mistakes and choosing growth is the mark of a true healer. The audience erupted in applause. Marcus scanned the crowd and found Judge Caprio, who stood and nodded, a gesture of respect and pride that Marcus would carry with him forever. During his residency at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, Marcus started a support group for medical residents struggling with burnout. He called it Second Chances Wellness, and it met every Thursday evening. In the first session, 12 residents showed up, all of them exhausted, all of them struggling, all of them afraid to admit they needed help. "My name is Marcus," he began, "and 3 years ago, I almost lost everything because I was too proud to admit I was drowning. I'm here to tell you that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the smartest clinical decision you'll ever make." He told them his story, the parking violations, the lies, Judge Caprio, the community service, the transformation. He showed them that redemption wasn't a single moment but a daily choice. One resident, a young woman named Jamie, approached him after the meeting. "Dr. Chen, I've been making mistakes too. Nothing illegal, but cutting corners on patient documentation because I'm so tired. Snapping at nurses. Calling in sick when I'm not really sick, just overwhelmed. I thought I was the only one falling apart." "You're not alone," Marcus told her. "None of us are. The system is designed to push us past our limits. But we can redesign our own responses. We can choose to be honest about our limitations, to support each other, to maintain our humanity, even in an inhumane schedule. Drop a comment about what support system you need in your life." In September 2025, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a national medical education conference about preventing burnout and promoting wellness in medical training. As he prepared his presentation, he reached out to Judge Caprio, asking if he would be willing to participate in a video message. The judge agreed enthusiastically. In the recorded message, he spoke directly to medical educators and students. "I've spent my life in the criminal justice system, and if there's one thing I know, it's that punishment without rehabilitation creates repeat offenders. But accountability with support creates transformation. These young people you're training will hold lives in their hands. They'll make decisions under pressure that could mean life or death. If we teach them that mistakes are unforgivable, that asking for help is shameful, that appearing strong is more important than being honest, we're creating dangerous physicians. But if we teach them that integrity, self-awareness, and mutual support are as important as medical knowledge, we're creating healers who can sustain a career of service without destroying themselves." The video received a standing ovation at the conference. Within weeks, 6 medical schools had contacted Marcus about implementing support programs based on his model. On a cold February morning in 2026, exactly 3 years after Marcus's original court date, he made a trip back to Providence. He walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom during public hours, sitting in the gallery and watching the legendary judge work his magic with case after case. A young woman stood before the bench, facing a ticket for parking in a bus zone. She was crying, explaining that she'd been rushing to get to a job interview, that she had 3 kids at home, that she couldn't afford the fine. Marcus watched Judge Caprio lean forward with that familiar expression of compassion and curiosity. "Ma'am, I understand you are under pressure, but I need you to understand something. That bus zone isn't just about traffic flow. It's about the dozens of people who depend on that bus to get to work, to get to doctor's appointments, to participate in their community. When you block it, even for 10 minutes, you're not just breaking a rule, you're affecting people's lives." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. You're right. I wasn't thinking. But here's what I'm going to do," the judge continued. "I'm going to reduce your fine by half, and I'm going to connect you with our community employment services, because I think the real problem isn't that you parked in a bus zone, it's that you're so desperate for work that you made a panic decision. Let's address the root cause. Hit subscribe to see more stories of justice with compassion. Marcus smiled, recognizing the same approach that had changed his life. When the session ended, he approached the bench. "Your Honor, I don't know if you remember me." "Marcus Chen," Judge Caprio's face lit up. "Of course I remember you. I heard you were doing remarkable things in Boston. A support program for residents. Speaking at conferences. Quote, all because of you, Your Honor. I wanted to come back and tell you in person. 3 years ago today, you saw past my lies to something I couldn't see in myself. You believed I could be better before I believed it. And you were right." The two men embraced, an unlikely pair united by a moment of truth and transformation that had rippled outward in ways neither could have predicted. "Marcus, I didn't change you," Judge Caprio said. "I just held up a mirror so you could see yourself clearly. The rest was all you." "Then let me hold up a mirror for you, Your Honor. Do you know how many medical students have been through the Second Chances Wellness Program? 234. Do you know how many have told me they were considering quitting medicine, or worse, before they found support? 96. That's 96 future physicians who are staying in medicine, who will go on to save countless lives because you taught me that accountability and compassion aren't opposites." Judge Caprio's eyes filled with tears. "That's the multiplier effect, Marcus. You save one person properly, not by letting them off easy, but by holding them accountable while seeing their full humanity, and they go on to save others. Justice isn't just about punishment or mercy. It's about transformation. You're living proof. Like this video if you believe one person can change countless lives." Today, Dr. Marcus Chen is in his second year of residency in internal medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. He volunteers every Saturday with accessible transportation services in Boston. He speaks regularly at medical schools about wellness and integrity. He maintains a relationship with Judge Caprio, sending updates and seeking advice. His apartment has a framed copy of the Providence Journal article containing his public apology, hanging next to his medical school diploma. When colleagues ask why he displays something so embarrassing, he tells them, "Because I never want to forget who I was at my worst, so I can recognize when others are struggling at theirs. And I never want to forget that the person who held me accountable with compassion changed my life." Sandra Phillips is alive and healthy, celebrating each day as a gift. She and her husband's scholarship fund has grown to support 20 medical students annually. Each recipient is required to read Marcus's story and meet with him for mentorship. James from Transport Connect now has a reliable volunteer driver. Marcus still drives him to appointments monthly, even from Boston, making the trip because, as he says, "James taught me about dignity and access. I can spare a few hours to honor that lesson." Judge Frank Caprio continues to preside over his courtroom in Providence, treating each defendant with the same mixture of accountability and humanity that has made him a viral sensation and a role model for judicial compassion. He keeps a folder of letters from people whose lives he's touched, and Marcus's updates are filed right at the front. The story of Marcus Chen and Judge Caprio isn't just about parking violations or second chances. It's about what happens when someone in power chooses to see the full humanity in someone who's made mistakes. It's about what happens when someone who's failed chooses truth over self-preservation. It's about the transformation that becomes possible when accountability meets compassion. It's about the reality that we are all more than our worst decisions, but we only discover who we can become when we face those decisions honestly and do the hard work of change. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over. 3 years ago, a medical student walked into a courtroom with a lie that could have destroyed everything. He walked out with something better than mercy. He walked out with truth, accountability, and a roadmap for becoming the person he was meant to be. Today, that student is a doctor who will save countless lives, not just with medical knowledge, but with the integrity and compassion that were forged in a moment of crisis and choice. And somewhere in Providence, a legendary judge continues his work, one case at a time, believing that justice is measured not by how harshly we punish, but by how effectively we transform. Drop a comment telling us, what moment changed the course of your life? What truth did you have to face to become who you are now? Subscribe for more stories of redemption, justice, and the power of second chances. And remember, Your story isn't defined by your worst moment. It's defined by what you choose to do after.